The octopus. You assume the thing doing the thinking inside any animal lives behind its eyes, in one place, calling the shots. Reach toward an octopus and 8 separate problem solvers reach back, and most of them never check in with headquarters. Roughly 2/3 of this animal's neurons aren't in its head at all, and that single fact changes what an octopus even is. Around 350 million of its neurons are spread down the arms in clusters called ganglia, and each arm can taste prey, decide what to do, and pass it toward the mouth without the central brain weighing in. Your spinal cord handles your reflexes, while your brain takes the credit. An octopus runs 8 semi-independent nervous systems and bolts a brain on top. If your arm worked like this, your hand could pick a lock while you slept. The body is soft and boneless, impossible to micromanage from one office, so control got shoved out to the limbs. Turns out the brain doesn't actually run the arms. Most of what an arm decides never travels up to it, which makes this the only animal that can lose an argument with its own arm. Cut one off and it'll still reach, grip, and recoil from a sharp poke for minutes, holding its opinions long after it stopped being part of an octopus. The skull, it turns out, was optional. The box jellyfish. Most jellyfish are passengers, drifting wherever the current dumps them. This one has somewhere to be, and it can see well enough to get there, with nothing you'd recognize as a mind behind the wheel. It carries 24 eyes, 4 of them capable of forming real, focused images, wired to no brain whatsoever. Those eyes sit in 4 clusters called rhopalia, one in each side of its cube-shaped bell. It doesn't drift and hope. It hunts fish and tiny copepods, and in lab tanks, it learns to spot pale obstacles and swerve around them. The Hawaiian ones even time mass mating swims to the moon, showing up 8 to 10 days after it goes full. So picture the math. 0 central brain, around 1,000 neurons per rhopalium, 4 rhopalia, 24 eyes, and somehow a working hunting calendar built out of that. Nature installed 24 eyes and then skipped the brain entirely, like buying every camera in the store and forgetting the computer. Each eye cluster sees locally. Then a simple ring nerve loops them together. The common version of jellyfish, that they just float and sting whatever bumps them, falls apart here, because this one targets prey and remembers its mistakes. It plans its love life around the moon and never has to overthink a thing, which puts it ahead of most people with a calendar app. The starfish. You've held one on a beach and called it cute, never realizing you were holding an animal that makes every decision by committee, because there's no head in there to make it any other way. A starfish has no brain at all, none, and yet it hunts, hides, and flips itself back over when a wave dumps it upside down. What it has instead is a nerve ring around its mouth, with a radial nerve running each arm, and the ring barely processes anything, so whatever passes for decisions lives out in the arms. When one arm catches the scent of prey, it becomes the temporary leader, and the other 4 fall in behind it. 1 nerve ring, 5 radial nerves, 0 brains, and the result is a predator that gets fed. Flip it over and you can watch the negotiation happen, arms casting votes until the strongest signal wins and steers the whole animal upright. Biologists went looking for the part in charge, and reported back that there is genuinely nothing running the show. Its body is built on radial symmetry, no front, no back, so there's nowhere obvious to put a head. It runs its entire life as a 5-way argument that somehow always reaches a verdict, which is democracy with even fewer brains involved than usual. If you're enjoying creatures this strange, I post new animal deep dives like this all the time, and subscribing really helps me out. Thanks. The sea urchin. Picture an animal watching a predator's shadow slide across it and quietly shuffling off to hide, except it has no eyes anywhere on its body to do the watching. The whole urchin is the eye. That's not a figure of speech. Light-sensing cells are scattered across the thousands of tube feet covering its body, and the shell and spines shade those cells so each only catches light from a narrow angle. By comparing brightness across thousands of receptors at once, the animal works out direction and notices when something large looms overhead, with no central brain assembling that into a picture. Your 2 eyes feed 1 brain that does the heavy lifting. An urchin's thousands of scattered light cells feed no brain at all, and still build a rough sense of something's above me, time to move, with just enough resolution to dodge a shadow. Its own skeleton does the work your pupil does, throwing shadows that tell each cell which way to look. So the common line that an urchin can't see and just reacts blindly to touch is wrong. Despite having no eyes, it resolves shadows and direction across its whole body. It's basically a pincushion moonlighting as a security camera, and it's staring at you right now with everything it's got, which is technically all of it. The skull stayed optional, and this time, so did the eyes. The sea cucumber. Threaten this animal, and it does something no brain in its right mind would sign off on, mostly because there's no brain around to sign off on anything. Its entire defense plan is to violently fire its own internal organs out of its body, then calmly grow them back later. It runs on a diffuse nerve net with no brain, and when something menaces it, it expels chunks of its gut and breathing organs straight through its body wall, a process called evisceration. The sticky mess tangles the predator, while the cucumber makes its slow getaway, and over the following weeks, it regrows everything it threw. It's been pulling this stunt for hundreds of millions of years, back before anything had a spine to lose. The thing is, a decentralized nerve net can really only trigger one big, blunt, whole-body reflex. No central judgment call available, which is exactly why the response is to just yeet everything and sort it out afterward. So its whole survival strategy is to lose the fight so completely, so messily, that the predator gives up out of confusion. Turns out, a body doesn't need a command center to make a terrible decision under pressure. It just needs nerves and panic, and this one has plenty of both. The cuttlefish. This animal can vanish against a black and white checkerboard in under a second. And the strangest part is that it can't see color. And part of the decision seems to happen in its skin instead of its head. It's colorblind. It nails the color match anyway. Its skin is packed with thousands of chromatophores, pigment sacs yanked open and shut by muscle, and the brain drives those. But the skin itself also carries light-sensing proteins called opsins, the same family your eyes use, which hints the surface helps read the surroundings on its own. So you've got colorblind eyes paired with camouflage that still matches color well enough to fool a fish that can see it. Imagine being handed a paint swatch you physically can't perceive the color of, and matching it perfectly by feeling the light against your skin. Splitting the work like that, pigment up top and light sensing through the skin, spreads camouflage across the whole body instead of forcing it through two eyes. So the easy assumption that it looks at a color and copies it has it backwards. Despite being colorblind, it reads the scene partly through its skin. Honestly, its skin moonlights as a backup eyeball, and the result is an animal that's colorblind, half thinks with its surface, and still out-camouflages every creature in the ocean that can actually see in full color. The Brittle Star. Same no-brain body plan as a starfish, 5 thin arms snaking off a little central disc, but this cousin might be quietly watching you through its own skeleton. Its surface is studded with thousands of microscopic crystal structures, with nerve bundles running right underneath them. It has no brain and no eyes, yet photoreceptors are spread across its body, and it spots a looming shadow and bolts into a rock crack before the predator commits. For years, the leading idea was that those calcite crystals worked like thousands of tiny focusing lenses, little eyes built into the armor. Newer work pushed back. It's not the lenses doing the focusing, it's a more spread out photoreception across the whole surface. So you've got thousands of light reading points wired to no central viewer, and the animal still flees a shadow fast enough to survive. The light sensing simply runs across the entire arm and disc surface, looped together by that nerve ring, letting it react with no head to look out of. Researchers keep quietly revising what this thing even sees with, paper after paper, which leaves us with an animal that hides from shadows it spots, using a body that, by every definition we actually use for the word, has no business being able to see at all. The Earthworm. The most ordinary animal on this list is in your garden right now, and its nervous system is wired so the back half barely needs the front to keep going. Its brain is so simple that the rest of the body runs most of the operation without it. Up front sits a tiny cerebral ganglion, and from there, a ventral nerve cord runs the body's length, with its own little ganglion in nearly every segment, each handling local movement and reflexes on its own. Which is why you can remove the worm's simple brain and it'll still crawl, just with a worse sense of direction. Picture your spine fitted with a mini controller in every inch, so losing your head would mostly cost you the ability to find your way home rather than your life. Strung out like that, segmented body wrapped around segmented nerves, no one spot ever has to run the entire animal. And the famous line about cutting a worm in half and getting 2 worms is mostly wrong. Usually only the front half pulls through, and the back end just stops. So this is the animal whose brain is so optional that losing it reads less like a death sentence and more like a navigation problem. Lose its head and it mostly just gets lost. Once again, the skull turned out to be optional. So very nearly did the brain behind it. The Hydra. Every animal up to now spread its mind around the body. This one goes somewhere else entirely, because you can pull out its whole nervous system, swap in another, and it barely registers the interruption. Remove every neuron it owns and it survives, then rebuilds the entire set from scratch. It's a tiny freshwater relative of the jellyfish, a translucent stalk topped with stinging tentacles, running on 2 diffuse nerve nets and no brain. It can live through having its complete nervous system stripped out and replaced, and after losing huge numbers of neurons, it gets normal movement back in roughly 48 hours, and under good conditions, it doesn't really age either. So weigh that against yourself. Lose a few neurons as a human, and the damage can be permanent. This animal can lose every last one and reboot inside 2 days. With its control spread so thin across those diffuse nets, and no irreplaceable command center anywhere, it simply has nothing fatal to lose. It treats major brain surgery the way your phone treats a software update, rebooting faster than most laptops manage. It's about the closest thing biology has to an animal you can switch off and on again. Strip the wiring out of most animals and you get a corpse. Strip it out of this one and you get a brief inconvenience. The comb jelly. This little drifter quietly rewrites where you assumed minds come from, because its nervous system might not even share an origin with yours. Its nerve net could be a completely independent invention, a second, separate draft of the whole idea of how to build the nervous system. It's a gelatinous, see-through animal that swims with rows of beating cilia that scatter light into running bands of rainbow, and inside it runs a diffuse nerve net with no brain. The strange part is that research suggests its neurons use different molecular machinery than every other animal's, which hints nervous systems may have been invented more than once on this planet. So the picture is that the nervous system might have been built twice over in Earth's history, and this transparent blob is the other version, drifting along looking completely unbothered by the bombshell. Nature apparently engineered a working nervous system 2 separate times, and skipped the central brain on both attempts. If comb jellies really did build their neurons independently, then a brainless distributed net isn't a failed rough draft of a brain, it's a whole separate answer to the same problem. Which makes this rainbow blob living proof that a brain may have never been the point, just one route among several to getting there. The Planarian. Everything before this scattered the mind across the body. This animal goes one step further. You can take its brain away entirely, completely, and the memories simply wait around for the new brain to show up and collect them. It's a small flatworm, an arrow-shaped body with 2 crossed eye spots, running on a basic brain and a pair of nerve cords. Cut it into pieces, and each piece regrows into a whole, functioning worm. Here's the part that breaks people. In both classic and modern experiments, worms were trained to do something, then had their heads cut off, and after regrowing a brand new head, they relearned the task faster than untrained worms, suggesting the memory was stored partly outside the brain the whole time. Cut it once and you get 2 worms. Cut it into a dozen fragments, and you get a dozen whole worms, and the trained ones still carry the lesson. If learning is held across the body's tissue rather than locked inside the brain, a fresh, regrown brain can just reconnect to memory that was never actually gone. So the easy assumption that destroying the brain destroys the memory with it fails completely here, because the memory outlives the brain that learned it. Most people assume you're your brain. This worm losing its head is closer to a minor scheduling delay. It's the only animal that can forget nothing by losing everything. The skull was optional from the very first animal on this list, and here at the end, even the brain turns out to be just a part you can replace while the mind waits in the dark for the new one to boot up. That's 11 animals that took evolution's one big rule, that thinking belongs in a head, and quietly ignored it. If you want more deep dives into the strangest corners of the animal world, I post a new one every week. So hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.